Hello, thank you for watching. What is a church member? And does that even matter anymore? Uh, you may have grown up in a church where, because that's where you were a member of that church. Maybe your parents were members of that church. Or maybe you were baptized in a church at some point, and because of that, you became a member of that church. Or maybe you've been a part of a church where they meant something different by being a church member. Or you may have even been a part of a church where church membership was never talked about. It wasn't a concept. And so for you, the idea of joining a church, of being a member of a church, is confusing. You're not really sure what that means. Regardless of where you're coming from, this video series is meant to explain what we mean when we talk about church membership, because we do think it's actually very important. But before we can talk about church membership, first we need to talk about the church itself. What is it? Why is it important? Simply put, the church is every person throughout history, all over the world, who has placed their faith in Jesus Christ. If you consider yourself a Christian, a follower of Christ, a believer, then whether you knew it or not, you became a member of the church. You may not be the member of a specific local church, but you are a member of the church. And that is important. That's important to who you are in Christ. That's important to your identity. It's important for you to understand your role in the local church and in the world in general. When Jesus was on this earth, he founded the church, and he didn't just found the church as people who attended his sermons or his meetings and listened to him and followed him around. That really wasn't the church. The church were those disciples, those closest to him, those that believed in him and followed him, who took part in his work. And here's what he said to them. He said that he didn't just intend for them to be a group of followers who learned from him and did what he did, although that was very important. He actually wanted them to be a community together. Here's what he said. He said, "The world will know you. They'll know that you're my disciples by the way you love one another." We're meant to be a community together that loves one another the way Christ loved us. In 1 Corinthians 12, Paul talks about the importance of the church and the importance of every person who's part of the church coming together to bring their resources and their gifts to accomplish what God has set forth for the church to do. In Hebrews, the author of Hebrews in chapter 10 says this. He says, "Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." See, a church is made up of people who meet together to encourage one another, to learn together, and to accomplish Christ's work together. Some people don't like the idea of that. The idea of church turns them off, or maybe they've been hurt in church, and so they've walked away. And if that's you, let me just say I understand. I've also been hurt in churches, and it runs deep, and I understand why it can cause some to walk away. But let me just encourage you as you watch this video and the ones to follow to consider what God may have for you by stepping back in and becoming a part of a church that is seeking to accomplish God's work in this world. Because church is important. It is God's strategy for reaching this world. It's the community that he gave us, that he gave you. And if you distance yourself from it, you're missing out. And frankly, you're not just missing out, but you're actually living in disobedience to what Christ has taught and what he's intended. You know, some people, as a pastor, it's not uncommon for me to hear people say things like, I should go to church more, or I have faith, but I don't go to church, and things like that. And I understand that mentality, but you need to know that it's not what the Bible teaches. And if you claim to have faith in God, then that means that you trust him. And that means that you trust his strategy and his methods in this world. And a key part of that is the church. It's actually impossible to live in obedience in Christ and not actively be a part of his church. It's just not possible. We're not meant to serve God in isolation. We can't do it in isolation. No matter how much we might fool ourselves to think that we're close to God, if we're not living in fellowship with other people in the church and actually seeking to be a part of it, we're actually not living the way Christ has called us to live. So we're going to stop there, and next time we're going to start talking about some of the reasons that God gave us the church. Thank you for watching.